Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to David's Den. I am David and I make videos about Stephen King, his novels, his short stories, and any adaptations that were made for film or television. Today we're going to be moving along in the Night Shift movie vlogs, and we're going to be tackling Sometimes They Come Back. Now, Sometimes They Come Back was originally published in, I know it was Cavalier magazine, in 1974. And I found out some really interesting things while I was doing some research, getting ready for this. It was initially supposed to be put into the collection, the film Cat's Eye, which we're going to be getting to very shortly, but it is 3 short stories well, let me backtrack and try that again. Cat's Eye is 3 separate stories that have a framing device of this cat that walks through. And the stories, 2 of them are taken from short stories from the collection Night Shift, where we also find Sometimes They Come Back. And that is Quitters, Inc. and The Ledge. But it turns out that Sometimes They Come Back was originally supposed to be that 3rd story. And famous producer, Dino De Laurentiis, decided that it might do better on its own. So it didn't come out in, when was Cat's Eye? I think it was 1984? It was early 80s. Whenever Cat's Eye came out, it wasn't done then, but instead it was done as a TV movie airing on CBS in 1991. Right? 91? Yes, 91. It was written by Lawrence Connor and Mark Rosenthal, who also did, for my fellow Trekkies, Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. They also did Jewel of the Nile and Superman 4. Thank you, Sean, for our little text earlier where you pointed out that is clearly their masterpiece.
Destroy Superman.
Then we have this is going to be this being Sometimes They Come Back, not Superman 4. Is directed by Tom McLaughlin, starring Tim Matheson, who a lot of people know from West Wing or Bonanza. I personally never watched either one of those shows, so I might not even know who this is. I'll probably recognize him because it looks like he's been on television for 50 years. Brooke Adams plays his wife, and Robert Russler plays Lawson. Those are the top billed. Now I want to go ahead and say, obviously, spoiler for all things Sometimes They Come Back. We're going to be discussing the film and how it lines up to the the original short story. So I may be giving away, oh, that's foreshadowing 4. So spoiler warnings for all the way to the end of Sometimes They Come Back, the short story, and Sometimes They Come Back, the movie, film, TV movie, whatever we're going to be calling it. For those of you here on YouTube, the movie vlogs work like this. I basically watch the movie, and as I have thoughts, I stop it, I talk over it, I pretend I'm just sitting in my living room and we're dishing, and I just talk to you about the movie and how it lines up as an adaptation. For those of you doing the Patreon watch-alongs, settle in because this is completely unedited for you. If you want to get those, you can click the Patreon link down below in the comments. Here we go. Oh my God, I totally forgot to do my recap. So for those of you who want my more in-depth thoughts, check out the Night Shift reading vlog for Sometimes They Come Back. It's one of my personal favorite stories in the whole collection. This teacher, he had a breakdown when he was at a teaching school, right? Like finishing up his own learning and becoming a teacher. But it was a rough, like, trade vocational school. He got hit by a student, and now he's coming back to work as a teacher at this new school, and he's haunted by the ghosts, the demons of his past. Because when he was a child, he was 9, I think, and his brother Wayne was 12. They were beaten up and mugged by kind of the greasers, right? This takes place in the 60s, looking back into the 50s, or 70s rather, looking back into when he was a child in the 50s. So he has these greaser gang kids, rough them up a little bit, and when his brother talks back, they stab him with switchblades. So he's haunted by these 4 guys who he witnessed kill his brother while he was running away and looked back over his shoulder. You know, his brother was saying, "Run, run!" And he did. And he's stuck with it, those demons. And sometimes they come back. He's an English teacher, very much like Stephen King himself was at the time that he wrote this. And his 7th period class is kind of the people who don't have the highest grades. It's mostly the jocks who just need to get above a D in order to stay on the team. And they give him some problems. It's just the one class he doesn't look forward to. And then 3 kids, one by one, kind of disappear or die. And they get replaced by 3 other students who look just like the 3 kids that accosted his brother. Okay, so that's the background, and now we're back to it. I think they could have spiced up the opening credits a bit. Although I do like the music.
I'll tell you, though, it would have been all right with me if I never saw this town again. But it was the only teaching job I could get, and I needed it, and I took it.
So that's different. It's back in like the hometown where he grew up. Actually, in the short story, he's moved away. One of the key points is that in all their paperwork, when he gets the new student folder, it says they went to Milford High, which he'd never heard of. And it turns out that Milford is the name of a cemetery. Right? I told you spoilers for the short story. Milford is the name of a cemetery in his hometown where he grew up, where these 3 boys are buried. So we are relocating it to that same town. And I guess that makes it immediate right away. And it looks like they gave him a kid. He's not supposed to have a kid. Why is his baseball cap attached to a belt loop that's just covering his... Is that school bus vibrating a little too much? That's just a very odd placement of that hat. What I really wanted to say is it's Chip something... Oh, it's not Conway. It is Chip, though. Olsen? No, I'm also reading The Long Walk, and that's Hank Olsen, and I may be mixing things up in my head. But yeah, Chip is a student that he has to kick out of the class because of cheating on his test. Osway. Chip Osway. So yeah, why do they change the last names? It's the same thing that they did with Salem's Lot. Like, why did Floyd Tibbets have to become Ned Tibbets? It made 0 sense. Just keep the names the way they are. We can keep it straight in our head, for fuck's sake. But what I was going to say is Chip gets kicked out of class. He has a thing against Mr. Norman. And then when these boys start showing up, they befriend him, and he comes to Chip comes to Jim rather later and says, hey, they're really trying to get you, and they're not as cool as I thought they were. They're actually really mean, which is kind of an interesting switch for the dumb jock archetype, right? I like that subversion in the short story very much.
I'm not an airhead.
That casting notice said, I want a Nev Campbell lookalike. So the short story actually opens on him being interviewed for the position, and it comes out that he had the breakdown. They ask him about it. Here it's all through rumors, and we're not quite sure how much of it's true. Could there's something in the short story about his baseball cap? I like he's wearing one. See, these memories don't exist in the short story, but... Oh. Okay, the timing couldn't have been more perfect, because what I was actually about to say is we don't need those memories, because as he thinks about his brother, from the language, we understand how much his brother meant to him. And also there's a certain memory of his brother saving him, telling him to run and sacrificing himself. So I like that they just juxtapose the horror of the event that we don't really know yet. This is our first glimpse, if we don't know the short story, that, oh, we know his brother died, but why are there switchblades, right? We don't know the story yet. The way that this is being doled out, the information, is keeping us on the edge of our seat. And I think craft-wise, it's really great. Of course, we're only 10 minutes in.
I saw the perfect place downtown today.
Honey, this isn't Chicago. There is no downtown.
So this is another Stephen King trope, is coming back to small town from large city. We saw it with Ben Mears in Cujo. They return to Castle Rock. This is another great Stephen King trope that is not in the initial story that they put into the film. We're still having the nightmares about it. That's key. The nightmares get worse and worse as the short story goes on. I think that after the second one, yes, his wife screamed, didn't I? Oh, so he's hearing it when he's awake, too. He does wonder if he's going insane in the short story when he starts seeing these kids showing up in his class. There's not this waking audio hallucination happening. But for this medium, I love it. I'm really enjoying this so far. I haven't seen this one before. And there's 2 more after this. So if you, so some of the tiers on Patreon have watch-alongs for sequels, and we'll be doing those soon. So in the short story, he's returning library book, and he took 4 pennies out of a jar. Except it's Jim, not Wayne. In the short story, it's actually 4 cents that he pulls out of the jar for his books, and it's Jim. So there's also this sense of guilt of if Wayne hadn't been walking me to the library. Now, Stephen King doesn't talk a lot about the guilt element in the short story, but as I was reading it, all I thought was, oh, he must feel responsible too. That must be why he holds on to this for so long. If Wayne wasn't walking with me to return the books, then this never would have happened. And they're really endearing us to these boys. And it is very tropey, but that's our initial way into the story, and we know who these people are immediately and what they mean to one another.
We're gonna go through the tunnel?
Sure, it's faster.
Ooh, see, in the short story, it's a train and they're in the underpass as the train's going over them. Talk about upping the stakes.
You want to get to this tunnel, kid? You're gonna have to pay.
We'll go back.
We'll go back.
See, they're making this a much more sinister. The age disparity is much more obvious, especially when they have what looks like a 35-year-old playing this teenage greaser, right? There's something in the short story about kids being kids. It's just some of them are 16 and some are 12. I mean, they're mean-ass kids. Don't get me wrong. I'm not excusing the behavior of stabbing someone with a switchblade, but it's literally just a mugging gone wrong. Give me the 4 cents you have on you. Okay, got it. And that's exactly what happens. Run, Jimmy, run. Except he doesn't run into the knife. They actively stab him, so that changes the meaning of it all. It wasn't a malicious intent. Not to actually kill him. Oh my God. So the big difference here is that the age disparity seems to be really pronounced when we can physically see it. There's also the train underpass versus in the tunnel, and he's not supposed to still be there. He's being held by the one boy, and then his brother backtalks him. Actually, his brother kicks Vinny, I think it is, in the nuts, and then he, out of retaliation, they stab him, both in the groin and in the chest. But before that happens, he shouts, "Run, Jimmy, run." He slides out of the guy's grasp and starts running, and as he looks back, he sees the stabbing. So this is letting him live with the moment a little bit more. I don't know if sitting with it like this and facing it more head on is the right choice versus the I'm guilty and now I'm running away while he's being killed that we get in the short story. And then the train comes, and that's the only reason he's saved, when in the short story it's because he ran away. There feels like there's a difference there that I'm not on board with all the way. Okay, so now it's immediate. He knows they died because he sees it. In the short story, he calls an old police officer he knew as a child and finds out that they died.
Jimmy, what's wrong?
Mr. Nell, the police officer.
I thought I heard a child crying.
Why is she hearing it? So instead of the word snake eyes, we're getting the flames on it and what is now the antique car. Oh, I want to watch Grease suddenly. Billy! See, and now the car's back. And now there's two people, there's two silhouettes. There was only one silhouette in the car before, the driver. One for the stunt and one for this shot.
No one there saw any other car but yours. Just yours.
So it was a ghost car. Nice. Well, now that explains why the car was missing. It's not a continuity error. It's what the other people were seeing. I wish that had been a little clearer. If somebody had said, why is that teacher chasing him?
guys,
Or,
listen now.
obvious dialogue, but then we would know.
No problem, Mr. Norman.
The
Wouldn't
score's
want to do
subtle.
anything to upset you, sir.
It's working well the way it accentuates and drops in and out.
Don't let them upset you, Mr. Norman. They're idiots.
So this setup that she is sticking up for him, right? We had the scene earlier where she says some of us want to learn, and now this, it makes sense that they go after her if she's the next one to die.
I said take a break, Mr. Norman.
So having the principal up his ass is really accentuating, reminding us that he had that breakdown, and we're seeing anger issues. This is actually really strong character development, told both through dialogue and through visual storytelling. Tim Matheson's doing a he's fantastic. He's really embodying this, even though everyone around him is an archetype. He's a fully rounded character. We have the archetype of the doting wife, and we have the trope of the good son, and now we have the greaser, right? The not promiscuous, but the sultry high school vixen. We have the jock, right? And then we get this really fully fleshed out person with an insane backstory. Is this a real home movie, or did it just take over the tape? And if this is real, has he not watched his King Kong tape in 30 years? So some of these rules of how this is working aren't quite so clear. And I know we're still toward the beginning, and maybe it's, well, in the first half. Maybe the mystery is what we're supposed to be getting. It seems overkill that we keep flashing back to the memory. But we got it all up front, and in the short story, we get it piece by piece, doled out. So I kind of like that they're going back to it, giving us the flashes that we know, and then a shot that we didn't get before, right? Like the car exploding. Is that a nod to Silver Bullet? But they showed her dying in his dream. Oh, they're torturing him. This doesn't happen in the book, and I like the addition. So the whole thing is a metaphor for our demons and our ghosts and the psychological baggage that we carry around with us that we can't quite shed. And sometimes they take over our lives. And to be careful of that, especially when we get to the ending where he summons a demon to help him with his problem. And then the last paragraph is him remembering reading that you can get them and you can get them to do your bidding, but you can't always get them to leave you alone afterwards. So we went from having a metaphorical demon of the memories of his brother's attack, well, their attack and his brother's death, to the literal demon that is following him around. So now here, to give us that kind of feel and tone, they're giving him these dreams, and these guys are haunting him throughout his life. I kind of like that. That's very creative.
There's a boy at the door. He says he's one of your students.
So if this is Chip coming to talk to him about what the other guys are saying,
You keep the door locked.
that's supposed to happen after class one day.
Yes.
Okay. I'll handle this.
I'm not going back to school tomorrow. I've got a brother in Kansas City. We gotta stop these guys. It's not my fight.
So he really does plan on leaving. That's not a part of the story.
I'm just a jock.
He has the, I'm just a jock. Oh, melodrama. I love TV movies. But yeah, here he's saying, I'm getting away because I'm scared of these guys, which is completely plausible. Maybe that's why he ran away in the short story, but that's not an answer given. He just disappears. And it's made to look like he's run away. I will say the self-awareness of this teenager, like I was just talking man, I didn't mean it. And they do. The makeup effects are on point for television. Ooh! Wait, they cut him to pieces with a switchblade. We still have to believe it happened. And there was no blood dripping from any of those things. Standards and practices. Network television? Who's supposed to be Vinny? Nice, so now we get the mirror shot to tell us that they're ghosts, that other people can't see what's happening. Except they could be seen in the classroom by the other kids. So, what are the rules for how this works? Or is this just them f***ing with him again? Swerve onto the grass? You know, they did make the comment about no sidewalks earlier, but there's a sidewalk. So, that was weird.
I saw him.
Saw who?
Your brother Wayne. He needs you to settle it.
Wayne?
There was this...
He never tells him to do this in the story. So in the short story, all he does is tell him, he looks into the three names that Jim gives him and says, well, yeah, those were the kids that we tried to place your brother's death on, but nothing stuck for a court of law, but they died 3 months later. But this guy is like, do you need anything? The only Milford that I know here is a cemetery. There's no high school Milford. And that's all the information we get. And Jim, on his own, gets a book about raising spirits and ends up performing a ritual in the classroom at night with the boys there that forces their ghosts to reenact what happened under the train tracks, and then a demon comes up from this pentagram on the floor and pulls them basically down to hell, we're to assume. It's not laid out quite so clearly in the verbiage, but it seems like they're being drugged down and out of existence in this world. The fact that he's saying your brother came to me, this is adding a little bit of a weird wrench.
Hello, Mrs. Norman. Can Jimmy come out and play?
So we don't get the grotesque, they look like they've been decomposing in the short story ever. Bernie, you really can't get up there anymore. So yeah, we don't get this grotesque look, but I love the imagery. There's something to be said for the decomposing bodies being so scary, and the flip back and forth to what we see them as. So I like this change, but it does say that in the short story she gets, is it hit by a car? Am I confusing that with the hit and run that happens while he was having his breakdown the first time? Because she gets hit by a car and has a limp and a scar, but otherwise she's okay, is how she's described. So she ends up in the hospital. I remember, I think she's hit by a car again. And then when he shows up to the hospital, they say, sorry, your wife's dead. And Vinny, I think it is, one of them comes out and he's the orderly and there's still blood on his uniform. So it's interesting that we're getting a home invasion in the movie.
Hey, kid!
So he's the revenge. That's very different. In the short story, it's just unfinished business because they said they were going to kill him and they died before they got to. And now here, it's because he took the car keys, the coins. So he says in the short story, he brought 4 cents with him. So that's literally what he had. So when they ask him, as I mentioned, they're kind of forced to relive that night. And when he says, how much money do you have on you? And he says 4 cents. He actually took 4 pennies and made sure that not one of them was dated after, I think it's 1957. So that way they wouldn't be new pennies since the incident. I love that touch, the detail in the short story. And now here we are finding the actual pennies and the actual library books.
Yeah, you first, Einstein.
They're just ghosts. They're not set up that they're evil demons or anything. Mr. Nell said it, they're just ghosts caught between here and the hereafter that have unresolved or unfinished business. They're not demons. They're not vampires. There's nothing that says that they shouldn't be able to walk into a church, and no lore that has been read out to us in this world that says that. Forced into, grabbing him or saying that how much money do you have on you. Basically, they're like, what the hell's happening? And they're described as having a face of utter shock and confusion while their mouth is making the right words. Because this demon is guiding things to make them happen exactly the way they happened originally. And then and that's where I was talking about the ball cap, because it's the sweat from inside of his ball cap. And it doesn't look like that's playing into anything here. He says, I have the cloth dipped in sweat of the boy that was murdered, and the spirit says sweat is precious. He throws it in, and sparks fly out. And he sacrifices a cat and throws in the blood. And so there's this whole ritual element to it, but he did research and basically trapped them. And then his brother comes out of the middle of the pentagram as this demon, the spirit, and one by one pulls these people back down into the underworld. I love that we're going to relive it, but now we're doing it in the location, and it seems like it's just, I hope this is going to work. There's nothing to set up, this is how to rid yourself of these demons or spirits. It's just, now we're here, fingers crossed.
Now that this is over, you're going to go to a better place, where Mom and Dad are waiting for you. I love you, Wayne.
See, there's no sort of theology at all in this story presented to us outside of he's in the between space. And why would the kid be in the in-between space with unfinished business? He didn't have unfinished business unless some sort of fate superpower knew that he had to wait around for this moment. Like, it's all being explained to us, but nothing was set up or makes sense. Okay. I actually really did enjoy that. I'm glad I watched it. I'm surprised I hadn't seen it before. Looking at this as a movie on its own, I think performance-wise, Tim Matheson was wonderful. He had a fully fleshed out character, even though he was given this, you had a breakdown and you're an adult living with this trauma, which could have been very much an archetype. The rest of the roles were kind of tropey, but I think that serves, especially in a format like a 90s TV movie, as an immediate way into the story. We knew who these people are, we knew who the trope good wife was, we knew who the trope bad kid was, the dumb jock, right? So we're able just to jump in and watch the story. It was a clever use of tropes in the writing, and everyone gave a passable performance, with Tim Matheson, I think, standing maybe just a little bit above. The dialogue was decent, but we left all these plot holes, right? The idea of the theology of how and why this works at the end, and why Jim was smart enough, or would have, I shouldn't say smart enough, but why Jim had the knowledge that it would work to do what he did by bringing them to the train station and bringing the keychain and reenacting everything just the way it happened. There's a reason for that given in the short story, but we're not at the adaptation correlation yet. The cinematography was decent. The editing, I think, was really good. The way it kept us on the edge of our seat, as did the score, right? I wouldn't say it's the most beautiful pieces of music I've ever heard in my life, but it did its job to accentuate the story that we were watching and help push the story along for us, the viewer. And all of that working together is why I think that the direction was fairly tight. My one big problem with this as a movie is there were some small continuity errors about how the rules of when the ghosts were seen or when they weren't, and who saw them and who didn't. While I understood, I think that the rules could have been a little bit more firmly established, and that's not somebody opening a book and saying, here's how ghosts work. It's just a little bit more consistency in the way it's shot and the things that we're seeing, or one line, like when the car's chasing them, and I had this moment of, oh, where'd the car go? I didn't understand that the people watching the incident outside of Jim couldn't see it. If there had been one moment like that earlier on, where Tim's talking to someone and his wife, who are you talking to? Instead, we get his wife hearing children's laughter when he's the one dreaming about it or thinking about it. So it's not quite clear, and it left me scratching my head a little bit. And frankly, it's the only reason the end fell flat. If we added just one more scene where he's reading a book, or somebody talks to him about the occult and says, this is what I've heard, or, but that was just a movie, that I saw the other day or something, and then he goes, maybe this will work, and then it does. That's all we needed, and we didn't get it. So I had this really great build-up, and then it just kind of fell flat because it didn't really make sense. But it made sense enough that I understood what was happening. It didn't make sense in the setup, I should say. So as a movie on its own, ignoring that it ever came out of Night Shift, we're going to say, what's a 3.5 stars? It's not great, but it's not bad. Like, I would enjoy this and watch it again, and I'm kind of excited to see what they did with the sequels, although I know this was a TV movie, and the 2 sequels were straight to video. Like, it didn't even air on TV. So that makes me a little nervous, but we'll watch them. I mean, if I can get through Maximum Overdrive, right, or The Mangler. Now, looking at it as an adaptation from the short story, Sometimes They Come Back, found in the collection Night Shift, all the major plot points were there. It had a breakdown. He had gotten this job as a teacher. The differences are slight. He was not an established teacher who was laid off, but rather coming from a teaching school, right, where he had this breakdown after he was hit by a student. Where in this, it's never quite explained what happened. All the rumors are that he went crazy on a student or lost it in the classroom. But I don't mind that so much. We still have this kind of, he had a breakdown background. They give him a wife that doesn't have the limp or the scar because she didn't have the hit and run. We didn't complicate the story with that. It really goes nowhere in the short story, so I don't mind that change so much. But he's not supposed to have a kid. I think that did a great job for raising the stakes in the movie. But we got that when his wife was killed, which never happens. Right? In the short story, she dies. In the movie, she doesn't. He starts reading this book about raising demons. It's very subtly crafted in the short story. We get a hint that he's reading it, and then we get a little bit more from the book, a few sections later, and then it becomes more important toward the end. Here we get no sort of basis of theology. It's all guesswork. The things happen back at the train tunnel, which I don't mind, although there was something really neat and clean about keeping it in the classroom, which was also his domain. All of those major plot points, Katie dying, well, all three students dying, even if they happen differently, like Katie being hung rather than falling off of a building or being pushed, I don't mind those changes so much. But the biggest one, besides him having a whole family, a child, is that the death of his brother seemed to be an accident. Yes, they were bullying them maliciously, and they meant to rough them up and hurt them, but he went to run away and got stabbed with a knife. Rather than trying to save his brother, he kicks Vinny in the nuts, I think it's Vinny, and then they come at him and maliciously attack him, stabbing him in the chest and the groin, because you kick my nuts, I'm going to stab yours. And the other thing is, you can come with me to the game, the baseball game. I talked Mom into letting you go with me, rather than they're going under the train tracks to get to the library for Jim. So this element of guilt for his brother's death, that in this, although he may still feel guilty, we saw that it was actually an accident, the actual murder. So that bothered me quite a bit in terms of tone, although the overall tone of the story was kept, if that makes any sense. So I'm going to have to knock it down just a little bit, and as much as I loved it and as faithful as it was to the overall plot, when it comes to tone and theme, I have to knock this down and go to 3 stars for Sometimes They Come Back as an adaptation. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching this watch-along on Patreon. You can click the link down below if you want to watch the full unedited watch-along. Or thank you for tuning in here on YouTube. Do me a favor and hit that like, share, and subscribe buttons. It's a small thing from you. Really helps me out as a new channel. And also, if you hit that subscribe and that little bell, you get notified when I post videos. They come out Thursday every week. And coming up next week, we're going to be looking at the first episode of the new, just came out September last year, podcast for Strawberry Spring. See you guys then.